Please be seated. The court is now back in session. I now hand over to the defense team for Ieng Sari to continue his line of questioning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, witness, before we let off, we were talking about your interview with Mr. Heder, and you did indicate that you remember having an interview. If we could look at document D108/27.19, this was shown to you last week. And I want to look at Khmer 00324-684, English 00170700, and French it's 00648967-8. I should note that on the previous page it says source Ong Tong Hung and Suav Kim Hong. This would be February 29, 1980. Let me begin by asking you, when the interviews were conducted with Mr. Heder, were you alone or did he conduct it with the individual that he also lists as a source, if you recall?
That I do not recall.
Do you recall where the interview took place? Was it in a room? Was it in a tent? Was it at a cafe? Do you recall the setup, the setting?
To my recollection, I met him several times, but sometimes we met in our tent in the camp.
All right. And when you met with him, I guess this is the thrust of this particular question, were you alone or was anybody else there with you who was also providing information to Mr. Heder's questions?
That I do not recall.
Do you recall whether you knew of Suav Kim Hong, who is also represented as the source of this information?
Yes, I know him.
And was he, well, let me ask you, how is it that you know him?
He was a Cambodian living overseas, and he stayed in my, he came from the same hometown as me.
All right, well, was he in right before the fall of Phnom Penh to the Vietnamese, was he with you in Bang Trebek, or did you just happen to meet up with him
I knew him when we were in France together, but we did not know each other for long over there. Then I met him in Bang Trabai in late 1978. So, in short, he did not live with me in Cambodia for a long time.
All right. Well, my question and what I'm interested in is to know whether when you were in Bang Trabai in 1978, the second time, was he there with you? We know that there was a B30, B31, B32. Did you see him there in Bang Trabai in 1978?
Yes, I did. But I did not stay in the with him because after that he was taken away. I did not know where he was transferred. But immediately when I was transferred back from Daekrahom, I met him at Bang Trabai in late 1978.
All right, so the record is clear. He would have been there October, November, December 1978, to your recollection. Is that correct?
I cannot recollect it very well. But when I arrived in Bang Trabai in late 1978, I met him, but then soon afterwards he disappeared. I did not know where he went to.
All right. And I take it you didn't ask him, when you caught up with him on the border, you did not ask him what had happened to him, where he had been.
We talked to each other, but I just do not recall what we had talked to each other then.
All right. Now, let's go to the page that I'm interested in, which is, as I've indicated before, 00324684. That's the Khmer ERN number. The English is 00170700, or page 9. In the French, it's 00648967-8. And I'm going to read a portion, and then I'm going to ask you a question, recognizing that we don't know exactly whether you are the source or the other gentleman is the source. And hopefully you might be able to clarify this matter for us. It states, I think after the party anniversary in 1978, Savon was arrested together with 2 assistants and sent to Tu Slang prison and then executed. Ying Suri later told us that Savon was a traitor working with Vietnamese. After that, Bang Trabai was officially divided into B30, B32, and B31. Do you recall whether you provided this information
I do not know, as I cannot recall it. However, I received that same information.
All right. Well, you were present there at the time. Does this what I just read out to you, does this coincide with your memory of the events as they occurred at the time, if you recall, that is?
Yes, it is consistent.
Would it be fair to say that when you look at this document, that there were extensive questioning being conducted on Bong Trebek? Do you recall that?
What kind of questions? You refer to extensive questions. Can you elaborate a bit further on that?
All right. Well, Stephen Heder was meeting with you because you were an intellectual who had been at Bong Trebek, among other places, and many of his questions dealt with your experience and your observations at Bong Trebek. Would that be correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you've indicated that the interview took place, or you met him over a period of days. Did he, by any chance, ask you to think about any incidents or to provide him with any documents or information based on your experience there or your experience thereafter, such as when you were working at S21?
Yes, I gave some documents to him, but I cannot recall the details of those documents. The purpose at that time was that I wanted him to spread the information about the hardships that the Cambodian peoples faced during the time.
Right. And he was also asking questions because of his own research, and you were providing comprehensive answers to the extent that you were able to do so. Would that be right?
Let me repeat that I met him. I told him what I saw. However, I cannot say what he recorded or what notes that he took. I did not read them.
All right. Let me go back to my question. From the series of questions that he was asking you, was it not obvious that he was trying to get information from you as accurate, as complete, as comprehensive as possible concerning what you were able to see and experience in various places, Bong Trebek being one of them?
Yes, that is true. He asked me about the various locations where I had been.
All right. Now, if we could turn to Khmer 00324687, English 00170702, and then French 00648969. And again, recognizing that this is a compilation of two sources, I will read a passage and then ask you the same sort of questions. It says, Ng Sri said 2 months before the Vietnamese invasion that the Central Committee grasped only, at that time, still only 45% of the co-ops in the country. One of his assistants, a party member named Kon, said that some of the party cadre had, quote, burned, unquote, the party line and pursued the ultra-left line and undermined the party from the below. Even the rightists had used the tactic of pursuing ultra-left line in order to undermine the party. We understood from this that one of the problems was that each co-op was supposed to be a little self-reliant society, and that co-ops were supposed to provide statistics on rice production, population, and the needs of the people to the higher levels. The amount of rice to be sent to the state was the sole responsibility of the co-op chairman, but many co-op chairmen inflated the production figures in order to make themselves look good in the eyes of the party and sent rice to the state at the expense of popular consumption. Do you recall whether these are statements that you might have made to Stephen Heder?
I can concretely confirm that that statement could not be from the people coming from overseas. It means that Steve Heder surely made with the Khmer Rouge cadres or Khmer Rouge leaders who could provide such information. We were in the camp. We did not have the authority to provide such information to him. It is beyond the capacity as a detainee in the camp.
All right. Well, the reason I'm asking you, sir, is if we go back to the original page where it says February 29, 1980, in Khmer it's 00324681. In English it's 8. I don't have the French, unfortunately, but it should be 00648966 or 67. It says source, Ong Tong Hung and Suav Kim Hong. And if we go through the next series of pages, it would appear, because there's no other listing as the source, that this information would have come either from you or the other gentleman you indicated that you knew and that you had been reunited with and met him, at least briefly, at Bang Trebek in 1978. Can I take it, at least from your answer, that this is something that you would not have said?
I can confirm that I would not be able to provide such an information. It is beyond my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. And I take it when it came to Bon Trebek, however, that was within your knowledge. So, for instance, if you had attended meetings where names were named and inflammatory language was said and quoted, that sort of information you would have been in a position to provide Mr. Heder.
I personally cannot know about the membership of the central or the party center, even if when I was at the Kawaidang refugee camp.
Thank you. Again, I must apologize. The translation must be awful today because I had never mentioned anything about what you're answering to. So let me ask the question again. Concerning Bang Trebek, you were in a position at that time, 1980, February or March, to provide concrete and reliable information to Stephen Heder. Correct?
Can you repeat your question? Because I don't understand, I do not get it.
Okay. All right, let me try one more time. Mr. Heder was asking you questions about Bang Trebek. I showed you a passage earlier, and you said you could not have possibly known that information and could not have given it at the time. And so I'm now asking you the question, since you had been at Bang Trebek, especially in 1978, you were in a position to provide information to Stephen Heder concerning that institution at the time that you were there, which would also include the meetings that you participated in or observed. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I could tell him about what I saw during my living at various detention camps in Cambodia, but I cannot recall the details of what I spoke to him. It's a long passage of time.
Well, I'm not asking for the details. I just want to make sure that I understand you correctly, that you were in a position to answer questions concerning Bang Trebek in 1978, which featured as one of the main topics of his interview with you. And as I understand it, the answer to my question is yes, you were in a position.
No.
I knew about the event at Bang Trebek in 1978 as it was the office where I stayed.
And concerning details that Mr. Heder wanted, you indicated that you provided him with some documents. When it came to Bang Trebek and what might have happened there and what you might have observed at meetings where Mr. Ing Sari was present, assuming you had the notebook with you, you would have been able to consult your notes to provide details. Is that correct?
President Witness, you do not need to respond to this question as it tries to draw your conclusion and it is not allowed in this instance.
Now, during those meetings with Mr. header, you also spoke about S21. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And at that point, he also asked you some rather detailed questions concerning what you had observed at Tuoslang, S21, when you were there, as I believe you characterize yourself, an archivist. Correct?
What you mean in Khmer Bansa or archivist in English?
Well, let's take it step by step. Khmer 00324691 to 92. English 00170705, or page 14. French 00648971. At the top of the page, we see, at least in English, that this was from February 29, 1980. Source. It has your name. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Now, it says here, I was an archivist at Tuoslang for 2 months from the beginning of August until the time I left in November 1979. So, those are your words. At least that's what he said that you were an archivist at the time. Correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In the same passage, you go on to say, in early August 1979, the Vietnamese were preparing the Pol Pot trial, and they needed people to look into the archives. So I went to work at the archives at Tuoslang and was paid in 3 cans of rice a day for my work. Now let's stop here for a second. At the time, did you know that a trial was going to take place? And if so, who was being tried?
As I recall, the trial was for 2 individuals, namely Pol Pot and Ieng Sary.
And do you recall when the trial took place?
I cannot recall the exact date. However, it was during the time that I was working at the Tuoslang Genocidal Museum.
All right. Well, you say that you were asked to assist in translating. They needed people to look into the archives. We know that the trial took place from the 15th to 19th of August, 1979. Would that be about correct to your recollection?
I am not certain, but I think that was the date.
And as I understand your testimony last week, you claimed not to have even known where the trial took place. You were speculating that it could be in one of 2 places. Is that your testimony, that at the time, being in Phnom Penh on this very, very highly publicized trial for which you were assisting the Vietnamese in, you were not even aware where the trial was taking place?
Indeed, I cannot recall where the trial took place.
Did you attend the trial?
No, I did not.
Can you please describe to us what sort of assistance you provided the Vietnamese for this trial?
I assisted in preparing the cases, that is the files, and in translating confessions into the French language. Some confessions, but I cannot recall whose confessions they were.
All right. Well, who selected the confessions? And you said you also assisted in the preparation of the file. Can you please elaborate a little bit on that? To what extent were you involved with those who were preparing to conduct this 4-day trial?
Practically, I did what I was asked, in particular in translating the documents, and I worked with other colleagues as well.
All right. And with the Vietnamese, were you speaking Vietnamese, were you speaking French, or were you speaking Khmer, or some other language like English?
I cannot recall the name of the person. He came to contact me for the translation, and he's a Cambodian person, not a Vietnamese. As I can recall it clearly, it was Mr. Kachanda who was overall in charge, but his subordinates came to see us. I cannot recall the names of those subordinates.
All right. Well, now I want to clarify some points based on your testimony and your statement, and even what you might have said to the press. We see here from this particular document, which is D108/27.19, that you say that it was in the beginning of August when you began working at Tool Slang. Now, if we can look at your testimony on 7 August 2012, which is Khmer 00832589, and for English it's page 104, which is from the draft, and for French it's 114 of the draft. Here you say, I returned to Phnom Penh in May or June 79. At that time, I went to Tu Slang, which was also known as S21, and I worked there for a period of time. Now, just to be fair with you, sir, are you saying that it's when you got to Phnom Penh in May or June, or are you also saying, as part of this answer, that you went to Tuol Sleng May or June 1979, as opposed to August 79? Which of the two?
I cannot recall for sure. I worked for a little bit more than 2 months, and I can recall clearly the date that I left Phnom Penh. It was in November, but I cannot recall the exact date of when I started working at Tuol Sleng.
All right. And in your statement, which you gave on 21 November 2008, you did indicate, and this is E3/97, Khmer ERN 00270697-99, English 00287-107, and then French it's 00241890-91, that you worked at Tuol Sleng from August to November. And then you say, my work consisted in keeping lists of individuals who were reported missing, translating confessions into French in preparation for the 1979 trial. So here you do repeat what you said to Stephen Heder. Now, there is, it's been reported that you gave an interview back in 2006 where you had indicated that that in July, sometime in July '79, you came across a confession that was being used as a wrapper for a banana cake. And I believe you indicated something to that effect here in court as well. Do you recall that?
President and witness, wait the prosecution. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The defense is referring to a source that has not been identified, that is probably not placed on the case file. So the questions should only be based on questions that the witness has already described, and it should not be using sources that carry no index number here before this court.
Do you recall telling us that the way you got to S21 was one day you saw part of a confession that was being used to wrap a banana cake?
The President, witness needs not answer this question because it is repetitive. You may refer to the transcript for that question.
Very well. I guess I want some clarification concerning how it is that you got to S21. Was it because of the wrapper of the banana cake? Was it because you ran into somebody and they noted you, they asked you to work for S21? How exactly was it that you ended up in S21?
I cannot recall the exact date, but on that day I was somewhere around Tul Tumpung market, and I was buying banana cake. And I noticed that one of my friend's name is by the name of called Dorothy. His name was in that paper that was used to wrap the banana cake. And then I tried to track down the source where this paper was taken from, and they told us that the paper was taken from Tuol Sleng. So it motivated me to find out as to what had happened to my friend. At that time, I did not even notice that there was an existence of S-21, but it was upon my witness of that names on the paper used to wrap the banana cake, then I wanted to know where my friends had disappeared. That triggered my interest in going there.
All right, I guess this is the point that I want to clarify, because now you're telling us that you on your own, based on the banana cake wrapper, went to seek out where Tuol Sleng is, yet Stephen Heder, in February 29, 1980, you said that the Vietnamese were preparing for the Pol Pot trial and they needed people to look into the archives. And that's how you went to work, at the archives at Tuol Sleng. So can you tell us which of the two versions is the correct one?
President, witness, please hold on. The prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The defense is trying to show that these are two contradictory versions. However, it is quite possible that both of these versions concur and that there may be similar information that can explain how the witness went to work at Tuol Sleng. So the way of challenging the witness, saying this happened this way, does not seem proper to me.
Mr. President, aside from being a totally inappropriate objection by telegraphing to the witness what they might want to answer to, which I submit is the exact purpose why counsel did that, which I find borderline unethical, I'm entitled to ask for clarification from the witness himself. The prosecution can conduct his closing argument as he wishes and as you remind the defense all the time. Now, he's given two, if not more than two versions. One, the Vietnamese approached him. Two, it was a banana cake wrapper that he went to. It calls into question his memory, his credibility, especially when we're being asked to accept quotations that he attributes to things being said by my client some 30 years ago. So I'm entitled to press this issue, and I don't think it's appropriate for the prosecution to be standing up and to be feeding the witness the potential answers that they may be able to give.
As a matter of principle, the objection can be raised only once, and party is not allowed to make any reply. So witness is instructed to respond to the last question posed by the counsel. The objection by the prosecution is not sustained. What I know for sure for myself was that when I first saw that paper, I went to Tuol Sleng. And when I got there, I learned that they needed people, new people to work in the archive, because it was during the period when they started the preparation for the people's trial at that time. So that was my account of that event, and I have always mentioned that in my response.
Thank you. Now, in getting into Tuol Sleng, can you please tell us whether you recall if it was guarded or if it was completely open and anyone could just walk in and have access to documents? Let me repeat the question. I'm told that the translation was poor again. When you went to Tuol Sleng, can you please recall and tell us if it was guarded and you needed to get permission to have access to documents, or whether it was unguarded, there were no guards, and anyone, including yourself, could just walk in and have access to the documents there?
When I first got there, to my recollection, it was guarded. The public was not allowed to access the place freely. And I myself, when I got there, I met with a person whom I knew, so he allowed me to get in. And then he also introduced me to Mai Lam, who was the officer in charge of that place at the time.
Thank you. Now, as I understand it, subsequent to this period, you continued to carry out research, in a sense, on S-21 confessions, and that you assisted some in translating confessions. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And some were doing academic research, such as, I believe, Laura Summers, correct?
Yes, I know Laura Summer. I have had contact with her for a long time.
And in fact, you've translated S-21 confessions for her, or with her.
When I had time, I assisted her in translation, and I also assisted others as well in translation work.
And my question now is, how did you have access to these S-21 confessions? Was this during the period that you were working there as an archivist / translator for the Vietnamese, or was it at some other point in time?
I translated the documents at the Tuol Sleng archive, but actually I started translating it when I was overseas. And I did not work as a translator when I was in Cambodia, except when I was asked to assist in the preparation of documents for the trial of Pol Pot.
Thank you. And can I ask, what year are we talking about that you're translating these confessions? You know, assisting others, that is.
It was from 1980 onward.
And now, as I understand it, you were not in Cambodia at the time, and if my memory serves me correctly, the internet wasn't working, and we didn't have access to emails and electronic documents. So how was it that you were able to get these confessions to wherever you were? How were they provided to you? Or did you take confessions with you when you left S21 for your own personal archive?
When I left Cambodia at the time, I brought certain documents from my friends and my relatives. I brought those documents along with me to Thailand.
Okay, now when you're saying documents, are we speaking of documents that you had obtained from S21 that you took with you? Is that what we're speaking of?
But
Yes, but I only took the documents that were available in many copies.
All right. And did you ever turn over those documents to the Cambodia Documentation Center for their archive?
No, I have never turned it over to any organization because the documents that I brought with me were the ones that had already been copied, so the original copy was still there.
Okay. Now, when you say the original copy, was there a copy machine that was used to copy these, or these were transcribed by hand, and there were multiple handwritten copies? Which of the two? Or typed?
Certain documents were typed, certain other documents were handwritten. The documents that I brought along with me were the ones that had been copied. I did not take the original documents, but I only took the copied documents from the original document.
Now, just a few more questions on this general issue. From reading, you told us that you read some S21 confessions while working for the Vietnamese. You then took some, and then you also assisted in translating for others, such as Summers. Would it be fair to say that over the course of the years, you have read numerous documents from which you have drawn some of your research and information concerning what occurred during that period?
I took with me around 5 documents. I cannot recall it very well, but later on in the refugee camp in Thailand, Mr. Heather approached me and he wanted to find out more about those documents. So he went to Cambodia, and then he got one photocopier machine, and then he handed it over to the former S-21, and I translated those documents into French, and I also circulated to others, including Laura Summers and other authors as well. And then at that time, Mr. Hedder went to Phnom Penh, and he bought one photocopier machine, and he handed it over to the former S-21. And even today, they still ask me to assist in translating certain documents as well.
Right, and I guess from all of that work, would it be fair, can you please tell us whether that reading those confessions and translating them, did that assist you with your understanding, your knowledge of what was happening at the time?
To my understanding, I read the documents that were extracted by ways of tortures. So I did not believe entirely the contents or substance of that message, but I tried to relate to other events that took place during the Democratic Kampuchea period.
Thank you. Now, staying with the document that we are with, which is D108/27.19, I want to ask you on something different. The Khmer version is 00324691-92. English is 00170705, and French 00648971. Actually the same page. It says here that this guy came to meet me and invited me to participate in the Second Congress of the Heng Samrin Front and to become a member of the Front's Central Committee, and I did. And I guess I just want a point of clarification. What exactly was this Central Committee that you became a member of? And how long you were a member, and what were your responsibilities, if any?
To my recollection, I stated that when I was working at Tuls Line, Vietnamese experts contacted me and introduced me to work in the Central Committee, but I did not accept the job.
Let me just make sure I understand correctly. On this page that I just read, it said that you became a member of the Front's Central Committee. But your testimony is that though you became a member, you declined to do any work thereafter, and that's when you left for the border. All right, well then correct us.
I do not recognize, and I categorically reject this document because it was not based on the truth.
Okay, now let me make sure that I understand you correctly. You categorically reject Stephen Hedder's notes from an interview which he took and where he notes you as the source of this information. This is your stated position today.
ខ្ញុំបាននិយាយ
I did talk to Steve Hider, and I also talked to others, but I did not tell them that I ever once became the member of the Central Committee of the Front. But I have already mentioned very clearly that I was never a member of the Front, and if you wanted to know that, you can ask member of the Central Committee of the Front, and then you found out whether or not I was there. Or you can always look at the record of the Front Central Committee, then you may find my names in that committee's composition if you wanted to find out.
All right. So just to make sure I understand you, at least with respect to this part of Header's document, but not necessarily other parts, this one in particular, you categorically reject. Or is it the entire document that you want the court to disregard?
I reject on the basis that if anyone wrote anything about my membership in the Central Committee of the Front, I would like to reject on that point, and I categorically reject it because never had I been a member of the Central Committee.
Okay, thank you. Now, just one final topic, and this deals with Hornam Hong. And you mention him in your book, and his name has come up in the testimony as well. And as I understand it, from your listening to your testimony, at one point he was elected as sort of the team leader for B32. Do you recall testifying to that effect?
Yes, I do.
And as I understand your testimony, you were present when he, in fact, was elected.
Yes.
And if I also understand your testimony and what you have written, this would have been the second time where he was appointed at one point, and then this would have been the first election, but this was the same position that he previously held.
When he first designated to the position, I was not present because I was still at the home at that time. But I met him at Bang Trabai when I returned to the place, and he was designated for the second time.
And now, do you recall whether during that particular meeting when he was elected, whether Ing Sari was present? I believe you indicated yes, but I just want a confirmation on that.
Yes, Mr. Ing Sari was present there.
And as I understand your testimony, you indicated that on that occasion, Mr. Ing Sari had repeated what he had said earlier at a previous meeting, much of which you've told us about. I'm looking at, go ahead. I'm looking at Khmer 0083349 to 50. English, it would be page 38. French, it would be page 41 to 42. Transcript, it would be of 9 August, where you say that you tried to remain unnoticed. I was just satisfied to be present and just to applaud. Hornam Hong was kept in his function of president of the head of the committee of 5 members. Ieng Sary repeated pretty much the same thing that he had said a few days before. And if we go to an earlier part of the transcript, you tell us more or less what he had said during the first meeting. And I just want to make sure that I get a confirmation that that is your testimony. That's what you recall.
Mr. Ieng Sary had repeated again and again that first Cambodia was facing severe problem with Vietnam, but eventually Cambodia would conquer the war. That was the point I can still recollect.
And was that not the case, sir, at the time? If you think back, if you know, that is, recognizing that you were in Bang Trebek, but from your research thereafter, was that not the case, how the situation was in Cambodia in October, November 1978?
The President, witness, please hold on. The prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question asked is not based on what the witness heard at the time, but the question is trying to have him confirm via subsequent research. Again, we have a situation in which the witness is being asked to answer as an expert. But what interests us in this trial is what the witness saw, heard at the time he was there, shortly before the arrival of the Vietnamese.
Mr. President, the furthest thing from my mind is to turn this gentleman into an expert. He can merely tell us what he recalls at the time. Was he aware of the situation at the time when Mr. Ieng Sary was describing the situation between Cambodia and Vietnam? And we're speaking contextually, October, November 1978. If he doesn't know, he doesn't know.
The only substance of what Mr. Ieng Sary said at that time was as what I explained, but I did not understand any other comments he made in other meetings, and particularly I did not recall the date when he attended those meetings. And as I have informed the chamber that I only can recall certain substance of his words at the time. The President. Thank you. The time is now appropriate for adjournment. Counsel, can you advise the chamber as to how much time you need to put the question to the witness? The time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment.
I have one question, Mr. President. One question only. And when I say question, not a topic. Thank you.
Are you suggesting that you have only one last question, or you are saying that one last question for this morning session, and then you will have other question in the afternoon?
Last question for this gentleman.
So you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, sir, you've indicated that Hor Nam Hong was there, present, when Mr. Ieng Sary was there making these remarks. You were present. Can you tell us, based on your observations and physically being there, whether he would have been in a position to hear what you heard from Mr. Ieng Sary? And I'm not asking you to speculate.
What I observed at the time was that Mr. Hor Nam Hong listened to Mr. Ieng Sary, and Mr. Ieng Sary appointed him to be the team leader of B32, and he accepted that designation. So at B30, there was a designation of people to different positions based on the assignment from the upper authority, and that was true for other teams as well of Cambodian returnees.
Sir, on behalf of Mr. Ieng Sary, Mr. Ang Rodam, and I would like to thank you for coming here to give your evidence. Our apologies if our questions were a little pointed at times. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
The President, thank you. The time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn for lunch from now until 1:30 this afternoon. Court officer, please facilitate the witness and arrange the place for him to rest during lunch break, and have him back to the stand before the chamber this afternoon before 1:30. I note the defense counsel is on his feet. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our client, Nguyen Chia, would like to follow this afternoon's proceedings from the holding cell, as he is suffering from a headache, a lack of concentration, and has a back pain, and we have prepared the waiver.
The President, thank you. Having noted the request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his defense counsel to follow the proceeding remotely through audio-visual means during the entire afternoon due to his health concern, and the defense team has promised that you will submit immediately the waiver of Mr. Ieng Sary not to be present directly in the courtroom. Due to the actual circumstance of Mr. Nguyen Chia, the request is granted. So Mr. Nguyen Chia will be brought to the holding cell downstairs, where he will be connected to the audio-visual equipment. And Mr. Nguyen Chia has expressly waived his right not to be present directly in this courtroom. The chamber requires the defense team for Nguyen Chia to submit immediately the waiver of Mr. Nguyen Chia with his thumbprint or signature. AV assistant is instructed to connect the audio-visual means to the holding cell downstairs, so that Mr. Nguyen Chia can follow the proceeding for the remainder of the day. Security guards are instructed to bring the co-accused Nguyen Chia and Khieu Sampon to the holding cell downstairs. This afternoon, Mr. Nguyen Chia is to be remained in the holding cell, where he will be following the proceedings through audio-visual means, and Mr. Khieu Sampon is to be brought to this courtroom before 1:30 this afternoon. The court is now adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ